Hello and welcome to this special discussion on the constitutional prorogation of the 10th Parliament of Guyana. More than 30 hours have elapsed since His Excellency President Donald Ramotar exercised his constitutional prerogative to preserve the life of the 10th Parliament through prorogation, rather than allow the combined opposition to end its life through a no-confidence motion against the government. I'm Dario McClellan and I'm joined by Eddie Lane.
Thanks, Dario, and good evening to our viewers. Of course, we are now joined by Dr. Roger Luncheon, Head of the Presidential Secretariat, Dr. Frank Anthony, Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport, and Dr. Vindhya Prasad, People's Progressive Party Civic Member of Parliament. Lady, gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you.
The Constitution allows, matter of fact, Section 71 of the Constitution allows the President to prorogue the Parliament. He prorogued the 10th Parliament. However, the kind of views coming out of the opposition, they have deemed it dictatorial, cowardice, and even illegal. Starting with you, Dr. Luncheon, what is your response?
My wife says, hell hath no wrath than a political party spurned. And I think she was getting at what ought to be seen as a fairly predictable response by the opposition. November the 10th still probably was an opportunity for them to trot out their wares and do what they planned to do, humiliate the administration and bring to an end the 10th Parliament. The President's incisive intervention probably aroused the worst kinds of sentiments that could have been aroused under those circumstances. So much of what happened subsequently, as demonstrated by the members of the opposition, political parties, we must concede it was not unexpected, that indeed they would try to characterize what the President did in the most demonic ways, in trying to question his motives and assign all sorts of allegations, illegality about this intervention. And the critical thing about it, half of these people who have contributed to this hype, many of them are lawyers, many of them are literate, many of them have experienced the previous resort to prorogation without this type of questioning and hype. So I would say to the Guyanese people, and I would say definitely to the supporters of this administration, that what you're seeing is not unexpected. What you're seeing is the opposition parties being spurned, the opposition parties being thwarted, and they're responding predictably. That is what I would say. And that's how I would interpret the immediate responses that we have chronicled on Monday. And I don't know, I suspect we probably can see it on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. It is going to take some time for the significance of the President's intervention to sink in and for a more mature perspective to be adopted by the members of the parliamentary opposition.
Dr. Anthony, let's have your view on the whole prorogation.
Well, I think, as you rightly said, in the Constitution, it's clearly outlined, it's Article 71, that the President indeed has the power to prorogue the Parliament, and he exercised that power. I saw from some of the statement, some of the things that I've heard, and some of the subsequent reporting of what transpired, that some people are deeming it illegal. But how can it be illegal if it's in the Constitution and it's clearly defined by Article 71? As Dr. Luncheon was saying, perhaps because the president has thwarted their intentions, that they have reacted predictably. And so we have to give them some time, let the high emotion settle. And once that's settled, perhaps we'll then be able to have a more mature dialogue with them. So I think it's very important that we allow this time so that people can settle their nerves.
Dr. Finley, certainly we would want to hear from your perspective as well.
Well, thank you for that. And I would like to agree with both gentlemen tonight that we cannot overemphasize that the act is a constitutional one, as Article 71 clearly allows the president to do this. Guyana is not unique in this. In fact, as recent as 2013 and 2012 in Canada, this occurred in their parliament. It has occurred in the Guyana's parliament before, where there was movement from one location to another. So I think one of the things that we ought to do, whether we talk about media or whether we talk about government, we all need to understand, first of all, that it is a constitutional measure. And secondly, it should not in any way derive that kind of response from the opposition that it did. What, as was said by Dr. Luncheon, it was a predictable response because in so many ways they were perhaps planning to humiliate, embarrass, and frustrate the government as they have been doing throughout the sitting that we have all been part of. And one of the things that the president clearly said in his address was that there were several options, and he exercised this option, and he clearly said prior to exercising this option why he wanted to do this and what would be the outcome. And I think we should try as much as possible to demystify this whole thing. What worries me is that the Speaker of the Parliament, who is someone who should know this, is saying that it is illegal, and I find that is a bit irresponsible and disturbing to hear that coming out of the Speaker's mouth. And I also feel that there are many parliamentarians who would have been in previous sittings of Parliament, and so they should have given guidance to perhaps newcomers when this whole idea of proroguing Parliament came about. And I think as a government, we are keeping the door open for engagement, for dialogue, for communication, because had the president dissolved Parliament, or even if there was a confidence motion, what that would have done was put an end to that option of having that open door policy for dialogue, for communication, and for engagement. So we have to look at it in that light. What does the act of proroguing Parliament achieve? So we know what it is and why it was done. Merely to have the welfare of the Guyanese people foremost in our minds from a governmental point of view, so that the affairs of the country can proceed smoothly.
Not only did we hear such utterances from the opposition following the announcement from His Excellency, but we also saw efforts to put effect to what they were actually saying. Allow us to share with you two clips from a meeting that took place at the public buildings following the proclamation by the president. What you would want to bear in mind, as well as our viewers, that following the proclamation, members of the opposition attempted to assemble in the House for a session which was deemed a session of Parliament. We have two clips from that meeting. The Attorney General put it in perspective for us when he was here yesterday. He said it was a meeting for a gaffe. But we want to give you two clips from that meeting which took place at the public buildings, and we'd like to hear your responses. First, the opposition leader, Honorable David Granger, followed by Mr. Moses Nagamutu, Member of Parliament for the AFC.
President Ramka's proclamation to prorogue Parliament is a challenge to our entire people. He has no grounds for this cruel smothering of parliamentary independence. The opposition will not accept this denial of democracy. No. And we will not be intimidated by the DPP's dictatorial. The opposition today, and I'm sure my colleagues in the line will change will speak for themselves, resist the PPP's resort to the We call for the earliest possible revocation of this obnoxious proclamation.
But to be able to bring to account the recalcitrant and renegade government that, as the leader of the opposition said so well, has violated the Constitution. The President of our Republic, by not assenting to bills passed by this National Assembly and being a member of the Parliament, has violated his constitutional command to obey and subject himself to this Parliament.
There we have it. Leader of the opposition and, in fact, the mover of the no confidence motion from the AFC, Mr. Moses Nagamutu, Member of Parliament. A challenge to democracy, a resort to dictatorship, a violation of the Constitution. Dr. Luncheon?
I want to return to what I said earlier and to confirm that when I spoke about not unexpected behavior, what you just saw is just a small portion of the evidence that I would put to the Guyanese people and to any sensible forum as to what I meant by not unexpected. Be certain in your mind that none of these or neither of the two presentations address the reason for the prorogation, the reason for the proclamation. What you had was a reaction. And, you know, I will say it is probably good that they could get this venom out of them. You know, we medical practitioners still feel that to incubate this poison is probably injurious to one's mental health.
Here we go. We have three medical practitioners here, and I see.
So whilst I despair about this reaction, I want to recognize its immediacy, and I could see in a sort of a perverse way something therapeutic. They're getting it off of their shoulder. Much of what they said is abject nonsense. Abject nonsense, particularly from the point of view of them knowing better. Particularly, Moses been around long enough. Yeah. I don't pretend that David, who is really a novice in high politics of this magnitude, but Moses been around long enough. And therefore, what his utterances have clearly led me to believe is nothing more than what the AG said is the gaffe. He got an audience. I'm certain that there were lots of members of the media. I understand they were streaming the proceedings of this, I don't know what we would call this make-believe sitting of the National Assembly. And I concede they needed to get this off of their chests. They needed to get this poison out of their system. And perhaps this was one of the better ways to do it. But what I'm saying to the Guyanese people, don't get carried away. Don't invest a value beyond what is hype. My concern is that you have a collection of representatives, elected representatives of the people. And how long, for what duration of time would this pretense game continue? How long do we anticipate it would take for them to feel that, yes, well, you know, we said what we had to say, we're back to maybe the square one, and we can engage purposefully, we can engage constructively with the government and with the governing party.
I know Eddie is ready with another question. I'm sure other doctors will want to chip in there. But doc, let me put this to you. In your reference to the expected reaction from the opposition, if we were to look at it in a different context, reaction in that not so long before the proclamation, you as HPS announced to the nation that the government accepts that it has been summoned to trial and therefore it shall turn up to face that trial.
When we sat over the last, let's say, 24 to 48 hours and reviewed the positions that were publicly being announced by the opposition, I don't believe that there was any likelihood, any possibility of the president, in all of his judgment, his political astuteness, could have come to any other conclusion. I don't believe there was anything that the APNU representatives said, that there was anything that the AFC representatives said that left the door open for us to conclude that the November the 10th session would be more than an exercise in humiliation of the government. You heard them gloating, planning what for them would be the ultimate. Never happened before. We're going to vote out of this government. Those were the considerations that the president grappled with, even before, but definitely on Saturday and Sunday and going into Monday. And I think most reasonable people, among the options that he had to adopt, would have ended up just like the president, prorogation, and end this foolishness.
But listening, Dr. Luncheon, Dr. Prasad and Dr. Anthony, listening to what is being said by the opposition, one is getting the impression as though the bottom line is what the president did was unconstitutional. Now, listening to the comments from the opposition leader, as well as Mr. Nagamutu, like you rightly said, Mr. Nagamutu is wrong a long time. He should know this is constitutional. He should have seen this, maybe one of the options coming. Matter of fact, the president said this is one of his options. Isn't it misleading as a leader? You ought to be responsible. Isn't this misleading the public?
Well, I find it very responsibility. Though I agree that a reaction could be prompted by an action taken by the president after careful consideration, as was mentioned, we also, as leaders, as parliamentarians, ought to be responsible in what we say and how that message is translated by the public. A perspective that one gives out to the public and also their perception of what you are saying can be skewed based on what you say and how you say it. So I think there was a distinct lack of that responsibility in the statements made, because we all know as parliamentarians, if we would read the Constitution, that it was a constitutional act. Just as the opposition could have carried through with a confidence motion, likewise the president has the ability under the Constitution to dissolve or prorogue Parliament. And I think we, as I mentioned earlier, should not let people get away with making these kinds of statements and also other statements to polarize our Guyanese people. I think we have come a very long way in our country, and we want to see our people united. We want to see everyone working together for the best for the people of Guyana. And one of the ways in which we can all do this is to ensure that Parliament runs in a manner where the interest of the people is placed in front of any personal or partisan gain. And I think in the entire sitting, and I'm one of the newest parliamentarians, that this has not been happening. At every possible time and on every occasion that it is possible for them to do so, they have frustrated and impeded the progress of bills in Parliament, and that is of concern to a lot of us as new parliamentarians, and it also is of concern to the Guyanese people, because when they speak of Parliament, it is not spoken of in any glowing terms. They ask, what is it? Is it a fight? Is it a fish market? What it is that our Parliament has become.
Dr. Anthony.
No, again, I think you raised the question about the constitutionality of the action. And while in the statements they have been trying to make it out as being unconstitutional, the same constitution that they're talking about, which under, I think, Article 106.6, that allows them or says that if the majority of members go for a confidence motion and they have the majority, then they can get the government out. So on one hand, they want to use the Constitution, that specific article, and when they do, that's correct and that's democratic. And on the other hand, in another part of the Constitution, when the President exercises his prerogative and issue a proclamation to prorogue the Parliament, somehow that becomes undemocratic. And we have to look at it in that context, right? That here it is, the same document, but when we as the government and exercise the powers within the Constitution through the President, it is deemed by the opposition as being undemocratic. And it's clear, they just want to put their viewpoint and want to characterize our action as being bad. Now, when prorogation is not something unique to us. It's not a unique feature in our Constitution. In all the constitutions in the Commonwealth countries, they have the article of prorogation. And Dr. Vinia just said that in Canada, for example, when the Harper government, on 3 occasions, prorogued Parliament, and they did it for varying reasons, did we say, or did we hear people say that Canada is not a democracy? When other countries do it for varying reasons, did we say that they are undemocratic? It is something that exists in the Constitution and it exists there for good reason. And therefore, in this case, we feel that it's important that we are able to engage with the opposition in some constructive dialogue, because we feel that the agenda in Parliament, there are some very important bills in Parliament that we would like to see pass. The anti-money laundering bill, for example. The President said when he issued his statement on the 4th of November, he clearly said that there are a number of bills that we would like to address. And we would need serious dialogue for us to be able to address that. The anti-money laundering bill has put this country in so much trouble because the opposition has gotten that bill in committee and has really used all sorts of delaying tactics to prevent that bill from going forward. And in the meantime, we as a country, as a nation, all the people here, would suffer because that bill is not properly passed. So, there are things that are more important that we need to put first as a nation. It doesn't matter which party you belong to. We have to see what is right for Guyana and make sure that those things get implemented. And here the President is creating another opportunity for us to have that dialogue, have that talk in a very mature way, and hopefully we can get this thing resolved.
In fact, even as we continue to examine the article of proclamation, which is allowed for the President to use through his own judgment and discretion, this is an almost new constitution that we have. This constitution was revised not so long ago, and these very clauses remained. Neither the opposition nor the government saw it fit to remove them. So the retort to questioning the validity of these articles, whether they support dictatorship or democracy, I believe could be very well contextualized. Let's take a break now, and when we come back, what we want to focus on. In that meeting in the House yesterday, several threats were issued, very serious threats. We want to play some of those clips for you and have your reaction. Let's take a break now.
achieved universal primary education. The focus is now on achieving universal secondary education
Constitutional reform is
This has
everybody
already been achieved in some regions, but more work has to be done in regions 1, 7, 8, and 9. There are plans to build and extend more schools with the intent that every single child of secondary age will be able to access a 5-year secondary education program in each region. In an effort to respond more promptly to citizens, the Home Affairs Ministry has launched an online crime reporting system which allows citizens who possess or have access to cell phones, computers, or other devices with internet connections to report criminal activities. Citizens can get instant access to security personnel on BlackBerry Messenger via 280-4E429. Reports of corruption can also be made on www.ipaidbribe.com. These reports can be made anonymously. Guyana is set to achieve the goal set by the United Nations Children's Fund UNICEF of universal birth registration by 2050. The General Register Office has launched an intensive campaign. It has decentralized its services to specifically cater to the needs of residents living in the interior location. Bedside registration is also done in several public hospitals. There are now 200 registration centers operating in 10 regions. Citizens are urged to ensure that all births are registered.
The importance of road linkages in Guyana's hinterland to propel economic growth and improve access to services is fully recognized. To this end, Budget 2014 has allocated $1 billion to rehabilitate critical interior roads, including the Linden to Lethem Road.
The modernization of the Justice Administration System, the MJAS project, has been completed through a loan from the Inter-American Development Bank. Achievements made under the project include amended and new laws, training for personnel within the sector, reduction of the severe case backlog, the refurbishing of courts, increased numbers of judicial officers and training, publication of law reports and their indices online, the establishment of a DPP office in Berbice, computerization of several connected systems, among other aspects.
Amerindian rights to land ownership continues to be a high priority for the PPPC government. The signing of a US $10.7 million agreement with the United Nations Development Program has paved the way for the implementation of the land titling and demarcation project, which is expected to provide absolute grants and certificates of title to eligible Amerindian communities and villages. There are 97 titled villages, while 77 others have had their lands demarcated. The Ministry of Amerindian Affairs will be working to process the first batch of 33 communities for land extension and 70 for demarcation under the 3-year land titling project. In an effort to better their lives, more than 42,000 pensioners are currently enjoying a 25% increase in their pension. This is in addition to the waiver of the Guyana Water Incorporated's bill. And in another attempt to enhance their lives, over 8,500 pensioners are benefiting from $20,000 subsidy yearly towards their electricity bills with the Guyana Power and Light Incorporated.
Pensioners.
Welcome back for those of you who have been with us from the top of the hour, and thank you very much for joining us for those of you who are now tuning in. We have a discussion here at NCN on the prorogation of the 10th Parliament of Guyana. More than 30 hours have elapsed since His Excellency exercised his constitutional right to prorogate the 10th Parliament to preserve its life rather than see it be killed by a no-confidence motion from the combined opposition. However, before we went to the break, we introduced to you something very concerning to most Guyanese. A number of threats issued in a meeting held at public buildings following the declaration of prorogation. And as part of that gathering, hundreds of Guyanese also gathered outside of the parliament. So while the leader of the opposition in that meeting described yesterday as a dark day for Guyana, in fact, democracy was at its best with the opposition being able to gather in the National Assembly in the absence of Parliament, with Guyanese, ordinary Guyanese, being able to gather outside of Parliament and demonstrate their discontent, their disagreement with what was taking place. I'm sure were the government to call on their supporters to also demonstrate and ventilate their agreement with government's action, you would have seen thousands of people on the streets. So democracy
but
was...
Dario, that's one side of it. I mean, what is even more concerning to many, many Guyanese is based on our history over the years, dating back to how long, whenever you have the issues of these protests, what it could generate into, it could degenerate into some serious conflicts and so forth. So, you know, a lot of people were uneasy to see this large gathering outside of Parliament. Those who would have listened and heard that, okay, the President would have prorogued Parliament, and they understand that, okay, there couldn't be any sitting, and see this kind of gathering at a busy location like around the Parliament area. So it also added, not only did it show democracy alive and well, but it also created some level of unease among persons who would have been traversing that area.
And you would agree that by and large, that when protest action is afoot, the language used by the leaders of those protests will inevitably determine the outcome of those protests. So we want to introduce to you some clips in the meeting held at public buildings, and we want you to zoom in on language used, and most of the language was demonstrated to Guyanese.
Individuals and businesses, Chinese nationals, Indian nationals, PPP associates, who they will give, whether it's broadcasting licenses, gold mining licenses, land grants, and the like. We, Mr. Speaker, I believe, ought to ensure that we will not honor any of those obligations.
They are playing with violence. They want to provoke us into violence.
When Charles prorogued his parliament in 1929, I don't think he had anticipated the route on which he was setting out. Charles I, of course, was the short king who lost his head. He lost his head directly as a result of the proroguing and the activities that followed from the proroguing.
The reference to the fact that somebody lost their head for proroguing Parliament sometime way back, and in fact that clip, I'm sure, went on, I thought we would have heard that part as well, to indicate that President Donald Ramotar ought to take note. Your reaction?
I think in a climate where not only Guyana but much of the world has been against violence, to use terms such as provoking violence and to fuel people's whatever emotion they might be experiencing at this time based on irresponsible statements, I think that is irresponsible. There is no other way to see it. Because we do not want our society or our country to erupt in any violence. I think we are a reasonable people. We are people who can discuss things in a mature way, and we can reach resolution, we can come to solutions that are in the best interest of the collective society. And when we as leaders use these terms and the manner in which we use this kind of terminology, then that sends a very strong message to those listening out there. And when we are in a country where a lot of the people in that country, predominantly now we have a young generation, what kind of message are we sending to them? We are saying that we cannot sit down, communicate, and dialogue in an atmosphere that is conducive to coming to a resolution, an atmosphere that is conducive to coming up with a solution that can see at the end of that dialogue something that is productive for the country. Instead, no, we must resort to other methods that are illegal, to use some of their terms, illegal, unconstitutional. Parliament gives us the forum to debate, to dialogue, and to make decisions in the best interest of the country. And I think that the President's prorogation of Parliament still wants to keep that door open so that we can utilize Parliament for the purpose in which it was intended. And I don't think that it is wise on any part of anyone to try to propagate those measures that ought to be taken. I think once things have calmed down, once what has occurred has sunk in, I would like to think that our leaders are inherently responsible people, and they will always seek to do what is best for the country.
Good, Dr. Martin.
I think what we just heard there, it's the height of irresponsibility. And the choice of language, the kinds of examples that were being cited were perhaps geared to incite people. And while those leaders who spoke were being irresponsible, I'm very happy that the Guyanese people have shown more maturity than they have and have not reacted to those kinds of wild sentiments. And it shows that people are not foolish. They want to see a more mature politics, and they understand more than what these irresponsible leaders are trying to give credit to. They understand more than that. So we have to thank the Guyanese people for their maturity.
And part of what we saw there
And we have to
too.
condemn this kind of irresponsible behavior.
Part of what we saw there too was the shadow finance minister of the opposition, Mr. Carl Greenidge, member of parliament, identifying two sets of foreign investors by ethnicity and declaring that an opposition that becomes government will not honor any accord, any business transaction that has been struck by this government and those investors.
I want to offer, and maybe in terms of what Frank said, to build on that perspective, and that's the responses of the Guyanese people. There is no doubt that there may have been a time when statements of that sort would regularly have led to the worst possible outcomes. I think many of us here remember the earlier parts of the 1990s, the latter part of the 1990s, the early 2000s, and the exhortations that were made and exhortations that were followed to burn, to engage in civil disobedience. What we have seen so far, and let's knock on wood, what we have seen so far is, as Frank has pointed out, the maturity of the listeners, even the constituency of the opposition, prepared to go out there and be supportive by their presence in Parliament and in the surroundings, but totally unprepared to listen to the rhetoric and act. I have some interest in security, and based on that, we have indeed been following and looking for instances to make pronouncements on what impact those statements by the leaders of the opposition on the 10th, what impact they have had, not only on the immediate congregation, but on the constituencies in the length and breadth of Guyana. And there's no doubt about it, they do have formidable constituencies. But this time around, I must admit, it seems as though their exhortations have fallen on deaf ears. And Wendy is right. It is a sign of maturity that indeed you might even say that their constituency, they've almost become inured. And when they resort to this hype and challenging and obstructing, that indeed the kind of response that they're getting far, far is less than what they expect, and definitely quite different from what they had received in an earlier time. So, on the 10th, I am certain if they were really genuine in those utterances and what they believe and what their utterances were, this whole Georgetown would have been a place. And people would be running helter-skelter under the impact of mob violence. I wouldn't claim that Monday and Tuesday were the epitome of good days and peaceful days, but I'd say one thing: Guyanese in general have ignored that rhetoric. And if you look at the records about citizens and their behavior over this period and the exhortations of those leaders in Parliament, you would see the disconnect. The Guyanese have said, we hear you, but you keep the trash over there and mind your own business. And that is essentially what has happened so far. And our expectations are that this maturity would continue to congeal and the Guyanese people over the more immediate period would continue to ignore these calls. I suspect even the callers themselves would find reason for them not to be running into a brick wall and making these idle calls for which they're getting minimum responses.
But I want to go back to, and Dario made mention of the threats directly to foreign investors and singling out the two ethnic groups, the Chinese and the Indian nationals. But we have seen the actions over the years. No support for the Mila project, no support for the airport expansion, and so forth. And now you've more or less capped that off. You put the icing on the cake with a direct threat to investors. I'm a bit confused. How could you say you're putting Guyana first? You have the interest of Guyana at heart. You want to see Guyana go forward, but you, on the other hand, you are threatening investors and you're not supporting development.
I'd say one thing. Give Carl Greenidge his credit. He's motivated by anti-government. It don't make no difference. Blackstone, one of the premier investment groups in America, came here and he led the action
Assault.
that dissed them. So this in the Chinese and this in the Indians, this in the government, this is a part of their whole fascination is attacking the government. It don't make a difference. If Donald Ramotar had dissolved Parliament, they would attack him. Whatever decision that this PPPC government would have made would have incited an attack by the opposition in Parliament. So I'm not surprised that they have taken this baseless behavior down to its lowest common denominator and attacking while anybody that seemed to provide some evidence of the PPPC competence, the PPPC ability to lead this country, to develop this country. That is all they need to make it worthy of being denigrated and being attacked. Once it's PPP, once it's government, that is all the opposition needs to launch their attacks.
I think Mr. Greenidge has taken his job too literally. Not because you're the opposition, you gotta oppose everything. You know, look, all these projects, and if you talk to some of them off camera, they would admit to you that these are good transformational projects and things that Guyana need if we are really going to succeed in the 21st century. They would admit that to you. But on the same hand, when they are in Parliament and when they are in front of the camera, they say something totally different. And it shows that they're not really interested in the development of the country. They're just perhaps when it's convenient trying to parrot the right set of words. but their actions is really to underdevelop the country. And that shows that is not a patriotic person. That's not somebody who really got Guyana at heart. And I think, they should really reconsider what they're there for. They like to use this statement that they represent the people of this country. The people of this country would like to see progress. The people of this country would like to see development. The people of this country would like to see their children go to school and do well at school. And we have seen that recently in this Because We Care program. Thousands of parents across this country came out and received their checks so that they can help to better the welfare of their child. Now, one of the things afterwards, because the no confidence motion that they put, it's a very skeleton motion, to use Mr. Granger's term. Earlier when, on the 1st of August, I think sometime around then, when the AFC and the APNU was having discussions, and he was asked by the media, what about this motion? He said it was skeletal, and that they need to put on some flesh on the bones, right? Eventually, when they laid the motion on the 8th,
One line.
One line, be it resolved that we have no confidence in the government.
Vintage Nagamutu.
Now, you tell me, if you got all these big grows with this government, then I do this, then I do that, put it in the motion. Let us see what it is you disagree with the government about. Subsequently, long after, then they make up a reason. And that is, you know what? The Minister of Finance brought some paper to the Parliament, statement of excesses, and we don't like that.
But this is something that was done 2 years before too.
Yes.
Exactly.
2012, 2013.
Yes.
And that was based, and when it came before them, they didn't say anything. How suddenly now in 2014 you're disagreeing with that, and that now formed the basis of a no confidence motion?
Was
Right?
this
So-
a misinterpretation of the way a one-seat majority should be used on the part of the opposition? Certainly the way the 10th Parliament has been characterized. It saw the opposition attempting to almost run the executive.
Well, we have seen how they've misused, the one seat that they've had, and tried to reconfigure everything so as to give them even more and more power. And a lot of people thought that, earlier when we heard about this new dispensation and how much promise it holds, and all kinds of things you were hearing just after the elections in 2011, what has happened? It has squandered all the opportunities. And what we have in Parliament is more impasse than anything else. And the development that all of us are seeking has been stymied because of the kinds of behavior that we have seen in Parliament. That's not what people elect parliamentarians for. People elect parliamentarians to represent their interests and to see this country progress. And we have not had that. And they have seeked now, and when the government tried to push these good projects forward, at every step they're seeking to undermine them. That was basically what Greenwich was trying to do. Even now, with the Parliament that is now prorogued, he is now trying to scare investors off. So, it shows a pattern and a trend of behavior that is anti-developmental. And obviously, if you're anti-developmental, then you're not good for this country.
But where do we draw the line? I mean, as leaders, we re-emphasize this point so many times during this program of being responsible. Where do we draw the line? Where do we say you have to be responsible because you're representing the people? Where do we stop this?
If you ask me, I would say over the years, we've had to adjust to the actions of the opposition. This is since 2011. And this view that they have that the legislature can indeed supplant the executive is profoundly unconstitutional. The executive powers reside in the executive and not in parliament. But somehow the combined opposition has interpreted their plurality in parliament to mean that they have the right and they can indeed assume executive power. This flies in the face of the separation of powers. It definitely has invited commentary, rulings from the Constitutional Court that in normal circumstances would suffice to telling them they're barking up the wrong tree. Unfortunately, it hasn't. And what we have to contend with is the continual efforts of the opposition to usurp the executive powers of the PPPC administration and repose it in themselves and in Parliament. And of course, this can't be done. There is no way our Constitution permits executive power to be exercised by Parliament, by the legislature. So we've had to adjust to this reality. It has come about, it has caused enormous difficulty and damage to Guyana, our image, and the vision that the PPP civic government has had for Guyana. So many of our transformative projects have fallen by the wayside, have been delayed, have been obstructed. And all one can say, not continue, all one can say is that there must be some overriding concern of the opposition that has dedicated them to this mindset, this behavior. And I want to believe that with prorogation, with the president's commitment to having another chance, another opportunity for dialogue during the life of the 10th Parliament, we may get to peep their hand and to see precisely what it is that has been motivating the opposition over the 2.5+ years of the 10th Parliament.
Dr. Lunton,
we have to cut you here. We have to take a break for the draw of lot. When we come back, we're going to continue on the same point.
Okay.
So we take a short break. Welcome back to this live discussion on the President's prorogation of the Parliament on the 10th of November, that is yesterday, Monday. We have in studio here Dr. Roger Lunton, head of the Presidential Secretariat, Dr. Vindya Prasad, Member of Parliament of the People's Progressive Party, and Dr. Frank Anthony, Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. And we are continuing our discussions. Before we went to that break, Dr. Lunton, we were talking about the transformational projects in Guyana and the opposition's attack on those projects. In light of their statements about putting Guyana first, I will give you the opportunity to continue.
The point I was trying to make is that over the 2.5+ years, the consistency with which the opposition has, for all intents and purposes, sought to obstruct the PPP civic administration in unfolding its program, the vision for Guyana, I think we must, let's use the word, concede that it might be betraying some ulterior motive, that maybe they're not opposing for opposing's sake, that indeed there is a specific motive. And the point I'm making is that this opportunity, the prorogation of the 10th Parliament, and the opportunity given to engage in the dialogue that allows us to reconvene the 10th Parliament under more constructive, more productive engagements, it probably provides us with the last opportunity, so to speak, of people in their hands to actually get an opportunity for the opposition to say to the president, to say to the Guyanese people, you know, these are the objectives that we have held close to us, that have been the reason why we have been behaving this way, and these will have to be addressed were we to return. And I think the president alluded to that when he recognized the need to keep the 10th Parliament going. I wouldn't say that, well, we know these devils and that is the ultimate. But the fact is that having gone so far with many of the issues of the day, we would be foolhardy to jettison, to abandon it by disillusion, voluntary or involuntary, and go to elections with all of its potential and its volatility, and more so, to start all over in an 11th Parliament. So I think as we look at what the opposition is doing and behaving, what they're saying, we have to give them credit, if that is what it takes, to say that there may very well be an opportunity that they will seize, an opportunity that we are looking forward to obtaining and engaging them, where they will put their cards on the table and say to the president and say to the PPP civic government, and moreover to the Guyanese people, that, you know, this behavior that has characterized the opposition over this last 2.5 years in Parliament, this behavior is deeply rooted in these considerations.
Dr. Luncheon, how much credit would you give, though, to the argument being propagated in the public domain, that from the very onset of the configuration of the 10th Parliament, it lended itself to the need for serious dialogue and compromise, particularly on the part of the government. And in fact, the government squandered such an opportunity. It has also been argued that from the time the motion was moved by the AFC, almost 3 months ago, the AFC indicated in the moving of that motion, or when it was announced, that they are leaving a window of opportunity for negotiation to take place, and that's the reason why they were not asking for a special sitting of the Parliament for the motion during the recess period. They were allowing the government to consider time for negotiation. Have the government of Guyana squandered opportunities for dialogue given the configuration of Parliament, the 10th Parliament? And are you in fact bullying, as was said in yesterday's meeting at the National Assembly, bullying the opposition now to sit down and negotiate by proroguing Parliament?
I would say two things. One is that historically, since the results of the 2011 general elections were announced, the opposition has had this misconception that Parliament conferred on the parties, the opposition parties, with a parliamentary plurality executive power. This is a total misconception. It has absolutely no basis whatsoever in the Constitution. And it probably still has remnants in the minds of some members of the opposition. But I think they're coming to agree, they're coming to understand executive power reposes in the PPP civic government that was elected to lead and govern this country, not Parliament. Parliaments do not lead, parliaments do not govern. So that's the first point. Allied with that is the PPPs, and clearly our historical engagement with the PNC, and we will have to concede APNU as a form of successor of the PNC, as a form of successor. And so the cleavage has been more towards the APNU/PNC. I can say without any contradiction that our engagement with the political opposition in Parliament has been essentially an engagement with APNU/PNC. And therefore this notion of no engagement with the political opposition, either before the no confidence motion or subsequent to the no confidence motion, is indeed false. There are records available of dense engagements with APNU/PNC on the political issues of the day. So I think we have to be very careful when we try to structure a response to those allegations that have been made about bullying by the People's Progressive Party, to recognize that we have seen over months, we have made the kinds of offers to the PNC that they have to the APNU, that they have refused, offers that could have indeed turned this country around, offers that would have resolved important issues of the day.
So there's no legitimacy to the expectation by the AFC that they should have rightfully been included in such dialogues as well?
The PNC or APNU has forever in our engagements insisted that the AFC is a part of the opposition, and we have said, you, Mr. Greenwich, are leader of the opposition.
That's Mr.
Granger, you speak for them.
Yeah.
You speak for them. The president has constitutional obligations to engage the leader of the opposition. And that is the context within which we have continued and we expect to continue to engage Mr. Granger. I don't have any doubts in my mind that very soon Mr. Granger, on behalf of the opposition, as the leader of the opposition, would find himself being invited to further consultations. He has obligations too. It's not only the president. He has obligations too as leader of the opposition to continue, and prorogation of the parliament by no way prevents or removes those obligations from Mr. Granger.
Dr. Anthony, all cards are now on the table. It's almost an 11th hour situation, a pullback from the precipice, so to speak, with regards to either killing the life of the 10th Parliament through a motion, which was not allowed, or preserving the life of the 10th Parliament through prorogation, which the President has done. Does this mean now that Guyana is at a crossroads and all cards must be on the table?
I like the context in which you put it. The no confidence motion would have killed the parliament. prorogation has actually worked to resuscitate or keep it alive. And I think that's kind of a good analogy. We have, throughout this conversation that we've been having, is that we would like to see very pragmatic, constructive, mature engagement with the opposition. And I think this has given us the opportunity for us to do so. And let's hope that after the rhetoric would have died down, that we will see responsible leaders coming to fulfill their obligations for the Guyanese people.
Well, civil society is already standing up and making their calls for responsible behavior going forward. We have some clips to play for you now. His Excellency engaged with a very wide cross-section of civil society today at the Office of the President, and we heard from several of those stakeholder representatives who came to that meeting as to what their expectations are. As we go through those clips, we will also want to invite our listeners, you, to be part of these discussions. You are now invited to share comments or questions that you might have that you specifically would like our guests to respond to or to comment on. The address being used is GinaGovGY, GINAGOVGY at hotmail.com. At gmail.com, sorry, or the NCN Facebook page, NCN Guyana. Go to those two sites, post a comment or a question, be responsible about it, lest we will not be able to use it. And certainly our guests will attempt to clarify or answer any questions that you may responsibly pose to them. We now want to go through some of those clips from members of the stakeholder grouping, civil society, who attended the meeting with His Excellency today.
The reason the President is given prorogation is to facilitate dialogue, to create a framework outside of the parliamentary confrontation that is inevitable. So he's done it. What he's done is perfectly within the constitutional right of a president.
We encourage all parties at stake to facilitate such a dialogue. We in the private sector would like to see such a dialogue take place, but we will hope that it happens as quickly as possible so Parliament can resume their functions.
The prorogation of the Parliament, I think, was indeed a right move. We cannot have a situation where you find that the opposition leader is saying that, look, he wants local government elections, and then you're saying, no, we're going to fully support a no-confidence motion. I think the parliamentary opposition is totally confused. They don't know what they're about. I think they're basically power-hungry.
I think dialogue is definitely needed at this time, and rather than say this side is right and that side is wrong, I think all the politicians should come to their senses now, because there's a period of goodwill, man. We're getting into the season of Christmas and all this, and I think this is the time for them to more or less have a discussion.
No, I think that we have to find a way to try and bring the parties together. Because we need, as a country, we have to find a solution. Regardless of how we got to where we are, we need to find a way to get out of where we are, right? And the only way is by dialogue.
What you need to do is come in a public domain where you have all stakeholders come together and explain, let both opposition and the ruling party explain their position, and let they work the differences out between the civil society, the all stakeholders, and all at stake, because this country has grown from something to more than something extraordinary.
Well, certainly the calls that you're getting from the stakeholders, they're clearly, whether it to be dialogue, whether it to be some level of engagement, but these calls are coming too at a time when the opposition made it clear
and during that gaffe, as you put it, Dr. Luncheon, in Parliament yesterday, the door is closed. Now, what is the way forward? How do we move forward?
Well, I think civil society's voice is a powerful one and should not be dismissed. And any right-thinking politician should try to listen to the voice of the people. And the people have spoken clearly. They expect a mature approach. They expect a reasonable approach. And they expect that the interest of the economy, the interest of the country's development, that should be foremost in the minds of opposition and government. And what came out clearly in all the comments that we just heard, they expect that government and opposition must dialogue. They did not dress those wishes up in fancy clothes. And I would like to say that I hope the opposition breaks with its consistency of saying it is our way or the highway, and they show objectivity, and they can rise to the occasion, meet the government, sit down, discuss the issues that are confronting our country on all levels. Engagements would have been going on within Parliament. It would have been going on before Parliament would have met on several occasions. So I think the government has always been very, very supportive of this whole thing called dialogue, and they've been very much open in their policies with regards to the opposition. And the president has, on more than one occasion, met with the opposition. And I think those things, those meetings should not be ignored, and the efforts to continue that whole idea of communication and constructive consultation, engagement, and dialogue must not be ignored. And I keep saying that civil society's voice is a powerful one. Those are the voices of the people.
But you have to bear in mind, too, that we have had occasions in the past where civil society, private sector groupings, petition to Parliament was ignored. So you have to bear that in mind when you're talking about the voices being heard.
And then the question I have too is, what's your confidence level that we can engage in the kind of dialogue, the nature of dialogue now required without maybe another three wise men coming to broker an accord, mediate? Do we need intervention?
I think we should give dialogue an opportunity first, and I think we are all reasonable people, and we all, when we sit in the Parliament, when various constituencies would have elected us to Parliament, we all went there with the people's interest at heart. So I am optimistic that dialogue should not be ruled out at this point in time. If there is need for intervention, that will come when the dynamics would have shifted. But I think at this point, the door is wide open for that engagement and dialogue, and it should be given a chance to happen.
No?
I think we should be pleased. I have a distinct recollection of what Guyana was when I returned home in the 1980s. And I've been part over the last 20-something years of what Guyana has become, up to 2014. And I derive an enormous pleasure about those developments. And I'll say this, I am not confused into thinking that those developments are essentially the consequences of just the People's Progressive Party. We have been able to, over these decades, inspire Guyanese of all walks of life, of all political persuasions, to be part and parcel of developing this country. And the opposition too. Just as before the 1980s, they have been historical examples of collaboration between the then government, the PNC, and the opposition, the PPP, over the period that ends of now, 2014. There has been, I would consider, specific instances, many instances, where that collaboration has borne fruit. And therefore, what we are looking for is not a gift from God or manna from heaven. It is something that has been cultivated, something that the average Guyanese in their engagement with each other, know that when we pull together, we achieve. And this has to be sunk in, and it has to be it has to almost grip the body politic, and particularly the opposition, to make them return, to make them appreciate that yes, there was a time when we made the contributions that led to this country being where it is and what it has achieved, and that they are needed to make those contributions today.
And certainly there's also a role for ordinary Guyanese across the length and breadth of Guyana in this continuum now to play a part. Yesterday we talked about the lobbying that is required, like we see in the US, where people write to their congressmen and women to make demands. This is the direction we'd like to see you going. This is what we would like to see. Certainly there's that role.
Of course there is. Yeah. And I think every ordinary Guyanese should take that opportunity that is there, because I think every person right now wants to see Guyana move forward. Everyone is looking forward to have a country where all can be united and where there can be unity and collective decision making for the interest in the development of the country.
When we look for examples of the transformative development of Guyana that Dr. Luncheon says he derives great pleasure from, we see it in clear terms in the hinterlands. Transformation, local democracy, Amerindian villages and councils being able to make their own decisions, manage their own lands and so on. Recently, the two shows...
their own economies
exactly.
as well as villages.
Not so long ago, the two shows gathered for their annual conference in Georgetown, and many of them invited the cameras of NCN because they wanted to express their view with regards to what was happening in Parliament. We want to look now at those clips from the two shows, our Amerindian brothers and sisters.
Yes, there has been a lot of changes since this government took over, and I know they are going to continue doing that. And my confidence is that should there be elections, I know that one seat, difference that we have currently will be erased. That's my feeling.
I'm sure that if this government, they will continue to rule this country all the time, because they are doing well, not for Red Hill alone, but for all the rest of communities and in whole for the country.
He's helping out the Amerindian communities. So my people are very thankful for that.
My confidence in this government, not only now, but since '92 until today, I still have confidence in it.
With this present government, I think it will continue to do the development at all times so that we could support him to be as a leader. That is how we are feeling there.
You have confidence in them?
Yes, I'm confident about it.
I had confidence in this government more than any other government, because we're being so low. Now Guyana raised to all nations, to Amerindian brothers and sisters.
I have confidence in the government because when you ask something, they responded immediately.
Go ahead.
There we heard views from two shows, leaders of various councils in various districts across the hinterland. Unprecedented in the history of Guyana, where Amerindian villages have their own leaders, are able to make their own decisions. Now they are pondering all across the hinterlands on developmental plans being facilitated by the government. In the budget for 2014, many of those funds that were allocated for the hinterlands development were cut from the budget. And the Amerindians are indicating now that they too would like to have a say as to where we go from here.
Well, I think the two last clips that you have shown, the ones with the two shows and the ones from the stakeholders, is giving you a wide diversity of views from a broad cross-section of Guyanese. And basically, all that you keep getting from those views, one, we feel that as a people we are mature enough, we need to talk. And from the latter set of clips, people have been talking, the leaders of those communities have been talking about the development within their community, and that they're insisting that that development continues. I think, you know, that speaks for itself. What they have to say is, you know, they spoke for themselves. I have had the opportunity of visiting some of these hinterland communities, and you're basically struck by the amount of improvements that you have. In a lot of these communities now, they have their schools, primary schools. In quite a few of the communities now, we are building secondary schools to serve a broader cluster. If you put your mind back a couple of years ago, these things did not exist. And for a child in the interior to get a secondary education, very often they had to journey to Georgetown. And the few that can afford that, you know, there were very few. Today's secondary education is available to these communities. When you think about health,
there's a scholarship program in place as well.
And of course there's a scholarship program. And when the program that we had with Cuba, where we sent a lot of persons to be trained as doctors and engineers and veterinarians and such like, a lot of the persons from the interior went on those scholarships. So it's not only scholarships from interior to Georgetown, it's also from Guyana to other countries where they can get a tertiary education. But when you look at health, for example, there was a time in this country when you had among our population, you had high levels of malnutrition. We used to see it in the hospital. You used to see a lot of white mouth, right? You used to see beriberi and all those kinds of things. Today, you are hard-pressed to see examples of that. And why? Because you have better nutrition in these communities, you have better health care. A lot of the under fives, for example, children under 5 years of age have been vaccinated. In fact, we have one of the best vaccination programs in the world. So all of these are just proxy indicators, and this is not just we saying so. This is validated by the international community, that these things are happening in Guyana, in our communities. And the people who live in these communities are telling us that we like what we've been experiencing over these last several years, because this is good for our welfare, and we want to keep it. We want to keep it because we know that this is good for us. Now, when you think about what now is being said that has triggered this no confidence motion, it is cutting out some of these programs for the people in the Amerindian community. And that was what we took and we were going to restore. Programs that are beneficial to the ordinary person in this country, right? These are the programs. And the people that we just heard there were saying, no, we would like to have these programs because they're of benefit to us.
Loans for University of Guyana students.
But yes. And then we have the audacity, some of these leaders, they have the audacity to go and say they have the interests of the students of the University of Guyana at heart. This year we are celebrating 50 years of the University of Guyana. And this is how we are treating the students that are attending the University of Guyana. But maybe there's a history to that, because when it started, around 63, 64, we were talking about, you know, Jaga Night School. So Jaga Night School grew up now, so we're victimizing the children who go into the school.
But I mean, you introduced a whole new perspective to our discussions, and it has to do with the investments that we're examining over the years. They're countless. We could look at health, education, youth, all the areas. I have no confidence motion at this time. I want to bring this in here now. I mean, isn't this a bit confusing?
Who then are the people that have no confidence in the government?
You know,
I want to say that, you see, commitment and vision are two important principles that really those with political ambition, those who feel themselves as an alternative to government, ought to be exuding in their daily activities, commitment and vision. And what has been playing out, as you saw in the clips, not only in the Amerindian communities,
right
not only
across
in
the
the
country.
academics, all over Guyana,
Yeah.
over these years, has been examples of PPP's civic and its commitment and its vision for Guyana. And we have to, in our engagement with the opposition, to imbue them to demonstrate similar characteristics. They may or may not have had demonstrations of commitment and vision to other ideals, but now we are looking at things that promote equitable living between us on the coast and the people in the hinterland, that deals with the dispossessed and the poor in our communities, that says to our people that we are investing in your future. We're going to convert this country low income, middle income, and we are working hand in hand. And I feel it is not unreasonable for us to insist that vision and commitment characterize the opposition as they engage this administration. It's the only currency that we know, vision and commitment. And when we are engaging the opposition for a constructive engagement, we gotta be dealing with the same currency. You can't get us committed and us following a specific vision, and over there the opposition has a totally different approach, a totally different perspective of how to move this country forward. So vision and commitment has brought us where we are today, and I'm saying that the body politic, in a comprehensive embrace of vision and commitment, would certainly move this country much further along the way to go to development.
As we had asked the viewers to send in their questions, their things that they would want clarifications on, I have a money for Dalrymple, and she's asking what could be a negative outcome of the current state of Guyana, and she's speaking of the political economy, the political situation, the economy, the legislative arm, the budget debate, and I see the person put April 2015 here. But let's leave it to 2015. The social and political norms in Guyana. Also, Ms. Dalrymple is asking how the government intends to address these concerns, and can public servants expect a salary increase this year?
There hasn't been a single year of the PPP civic administration since 1992 that public servants have not gotten salary increases. So just on the basis of our traditions, on the basis of reasonable expectations, we can say to listener Dalrymple that yes. But I want to get to the question, the real question that has been asked, and really recognize this is a question for the body politic. It's not a question for the PPP alone. It's a question from a person who is knowledgeable and realizes what are the hurdles, what have been the challenges we have faced over the decades, and we wondering, can we deal with them? Can, in the context of prorogation, can the government and the opposition parties get together and confront those challenges and put on the table something that allows us the confidence of feeling, yes, we're on the right track and we're moving forward. And all I would say to the Dalrymples of Guyana is we need to work on it. Comrade Chetty hallowed struggle. We ain't going to get no gift from heaven. As I've said before, no manna has brought us where we are today. We have to struggle to turn this country around. And our engagement with the opposition over the period of prorogation, where hopefully it ends with a constructive and a useful engagement, it is going to be a period where we will have to struggle to have the two sides, the government and the opposition, cleaving and working on the way forward.
There's another question from Atiye Budu, and that person is asking, can the prorogue parliament means no budget for 2015, and can the president suspend the constitution and rule by presidential decree?
Presidential decree for governing Guyana is not a feature of the Guyana constitution. Many constitutions, if you go into Venezuela, you would see executive decrees that litter every page in their constitution. It isn't ours. Ours is a parliamentary democracy. So room for presidential decree is quite limited, and definitely not for governing, the run-of-the-mill governing. The budget is a constitutional requirement. Within 4 months of the beginning of a fiscal year, the Minister of Finance, the minister responsible for finance, is constitutionally obligated to lay the budget in Parliament.
Going back to our discussions earlier, we'd have to answer these two questions from our viewers. But going back to the issue of development and where Guyana is now, we have a short video which basically put the development in Guyana into context. We want to take a look at that. When we come back, we're going to talk some more about the development and the transformational projects in Guyana.
This was Guyana just over 2 decades ago. Bankrupt, its people despondent, collapsing social and physical infrastructure, second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, no housing program, production at its lowest level, 94% of every dollar serviced external debt. From the dawn of a new era, enter a new Guyana. This is our Guyana now, blooming.
Well, certainly I think that video would have set the tone for the rest of our discussions over the next 10 minutes or so.
Well, I think the video is a tangible reminder of the successful forays that government would have made in every sphere in this country towards the development of the country. If you look at the aesthetics of the landscape of our country, even by simply driving through a few areas, you can see the transformation evident. You don't have to look very far to see it. And one of the things that I feel is that we are poised on the brink to do more as a government and as a country. And we must always remember that. And we should not in any way stifle our conscience and try to impede that growth that we have struggled, as Dr. Luncheon said, struggled. Many people would have been part of this process. And speaking of struggle and being part of a process, I think we all need to recognize that like a jigsaw puzzle, we are all part of a process to see the country continue its strides upwards.
HPS, that video encapsulates what you said earlier about the Guyana you came back to in the 80s and the Guyana you now experience and enjoy and contribute to developing.
It's worth fighting for. It's worth all of the sacrifices that's been put into getting us where we are. And I can go even further by saying, and where we plan to be, it would be worth it. All of us have an obligation to ourselves, to the generations to come, a vision of this country and the development of its greatness.
We've been hearing from our viewers on Facebook as well, and we want to share some of those comments with you. People have been posting. I don't have eyes for those. Eddie, you have to help me there.
This person is saying, this person's screen name is Cobras, I think it is. When APNU supporters were telling Granger to take care of your own interests and don't let a third party run your business, Granger never listened. All this huff and puff by the AFC to bring the no confidence before the government, business has gone to waste. Now they are wondering what would be next. Well, Donald called his shot and Ramjitan light is dimmed. Moses was hollering as usual and no one pays him any mind. Now we must place the blame on Ramjitan, the AFC, for pushing APNU to a breaking point. The deal is done and the PPP know what's their next move. What APNU and our AFC do from here on is not my business. AFC lacks political maturity. This is another one. They brought themselves and the PNC to their knees. They have been ejected and beaten at their own game and in their own home turf. Maturity and leadership is lacking in the AFC. Granger allowed the fools in the AFC to tug at his pants, and he also ended up in a ditch with the AFC. Politics is about maturity and strategy, and the AFC lacks both.
I see it has
I'm seeing another one here.
Humor from our guests.
As a nation, we should remember the president's doors are open for talks with the opposition. That will be in the best interest of all Guyanese. Whoever the leader of the opposition with a one-seat majority clearly said that their doors. However, the leader of the opposition with a one-seat majority clearly said that their doors are closed. And another person commenting on Facebook, Timothy, well, it's an extremely long name, you're seeing it here. Why do you insist on coming on a social media with a fake name and IDs? Cowards hide behind fake names and proclaim foul play. The government can govern for 6 months without any sittings. Rajendra Bisesar, why are you and the AFC afraid of? What you and the AFC afraid of? I figure the person's right. Didn't the president act according to the constitution? And another comment here, the only thing our political opposition share in common is their disdain for the Donald Ramotar administration. Sadly, this shared abhorrence is insufficient at guaranteeing them electoral victory. Further, the politics of AFC and APNU may be somewhat effective in debasing the government, but I'm yet to understand whether their vision outside of derailing stability and progress would somehow result in them bettering the quality of life for Guyanese. It's easy to forget what it was. Well, I couldn't get the rest of the comment there.
Good segue for us to go into our final few minutes, just about 5 minutes remaining. Certainly, Guyanese at home and abroad are having their say. The social media is alight, it's on fire. All day yesterday, all day today, people all over the world are tuning in. they're having a say, and certainly I would hope to see a lot of civil society and ordinary Guyanese views brought to the fore in any future dialogue as we go forward in the coming days and weeks.
We have just a few minutes before we wrap this up, and I think it's an opportune time for us to hear the views of you, the members of our panel, with regards to moving forward. What is the way forward from here?
I think it's very clear. We have been talking about it throughout the discussion that we were having, and that is this has given us a good opportunity for us to have constructive engagement. I think that has been repeated throughout this discussion. We have seen that when the President had his meeting with stakeholders, a wide variety of people from various backgrounds, that sentiment has been echoed. And I'm sure over the weeks, as the President and other people engage different groups of Guyanese, that you'll be hearing a lot more of that people would like to see discussion and dialogue. And let's hope that, you know, we'll have a more mature behavior from the opposition, and that they would come and sit with the government and have a very constructive engagement, so that in the end we will be able to advance our country. We just seen a video that depicts the beauty of the country and how we have even further enhanced that beauty by all the different transformational kinds of things that we have done over the years. And that shows that when we work together as a team, a Guyanese team, that we are able to accomplish well beyond maybe people's imagination and expectation. This video just highlights that. And while maybe we can see a little bit on that video, what we have done in terms of the human resource development of this country, it's phenomenal. So much more people are educated, so much more people going to school, so much more people are healthier. It's a tremendous transformation, and we must all be proud of that. So I would hope that we can get the opposition to a discussion so that we can be more meaningfully engaged. And once that happens, sooner or later, we'll be able to go back to Parliament and have a more constructive Parliament.
I would think all eyes around the world are looking at us to see what we will do next, and I think we have heard the voices of people of all backgrounds, and I think patriotism must rise in all of us, and we should ensure that the people of Guyana enjoy the stability that they have enjoyed during the tenure of this government, and you want that stability to continue, you want that development to continue, and I think it would be remiss on all our parts if we did not take a reasonable approach towards ensuring that that progress is maintained. And the word that is right now in the air is that of dialogue, and that is what the prorogation of Parliament would have hoped to achieve. So I think if we can utilize the opportunity that we've been given with this to ensure that we can resume Parliament and have sittings that come to a constructive end and a productive end, then I think as a people we would have achieved. And when we look at it, we should not look at it as government and opposition necessarily. We should look at it as a collective, as the people of Guyana. If we all exhibit that maturity while this process is ongoing, while we get to that point of dialogue, while we get to the end point, then I think we would have demonstrated to the world that we are indeed a democracy, and we are indeed a people who have learned from our history, who have learned from sacrifices and struggle of peoples before us, and we are ready to take our country forward. So I want to see maturity, I want to see level-headedness, I want to see the opposition meet the government, and I want to see that dialogue, that constructive engagement ensue, so that we as a people can continue to keep our flag flying high and proudly. We're all proud Guyanese.
Dr. Luncheon.
It's really obvious that we have faced challenges and we have overcome. And it is in this context we should see what faces us today. We cannot fail. The expectations are enormous. The growth, the development that has taken place has made this country what it is, and has indeed built in Guyanese in Guyana, Guyanese in the diaspora, expectations of more to come. And we have to give credit to the Guyanese people who have over the years followed the leadership of the People's Progressive Party civic government in doing and creating this miracle. We have the challenge today of bringing together all of the forces that we recognize are needed to make contributions to continue to make this dream possible. And all I can say to those who are interested like us in the development of this country, that they would continue to maintain the same type of scrutiny on the government and on the opposition, and ensure that the efforts that are needed from the body politic, these efforts are realized, and indeed we can look forward confidently into the future.
Dr. Roger Luncheon, head of the Presidential Secretariat and Cabinet Secretary, Minister Frank Anthony, Culture, Youth and Sport, Dr. Vindi Prasad, Member of Parliament of particularly the 10th Parliament, that we are seeing so much troubles about. And you, our viewers, we want to thank you very much for having joined us for these discussions. We encourage you to continue to tune in to this particular channel for updates on the way forward. The way forward is indeed being plotted as we speak, and you have a part to play as well. You must be speaking to your representatives at this moment, lobby them, ask for representation, in fact, insist that they represent you in a meaningful way. Eddie Lane?
Yes, Dario, I want to encourage our viewers to, even though the program is over now, we want to encourage them to continue to send us their emails. Log on to NCN Guyana Facebook page and put your comments, send your questions, whatever views you want to express. We want to assure you that we're going to share those views on the program here. So again, Dario, our guest, on behalf of Dario and myself, we want to thank you very much for joining us this evening, and we want to thank you very much at home for joining us.
Thank you.
This was Guyana just over 2 decades ago. Bankrupt, its people despondent, collapsing social and physical infrastructure, second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, no housing program, production at its lowest level, 94% of every dollar serviced external debt. From the dawn of a new era, enter a new Guyana. This is our Guyana now, blooming,